Summer can be such a tricky time for parents of differently wired kids. Finding ways to keep kids active and learning over the break, whether at home or on vacation, it can be hard. Fat Brain Toys is a family-run business that has been curating and creating quality toys, games, and gifts that both entertain and educate for more than 20 years. Almost all of Fat Brain's toys and games are screen-free, and what I love about them is they encourage kids to get creative and explore the world around them through open-ended play. I'm especially drawn to this really cool product called Mr. Bendy. It's a sturdy yet bendable figure with posable arms, legs, and eyes. It comes with wax bendy sticks that you can use to turn Mr. Bendy into really anything, an astronaut, a guitarist, a pirate. And you can play it as a game with the sand timer and game tokens, or you can set those aside and just engage in open-ended play to explore things like spatial reasoning, creativity, and observation skills. I think what I love most about Mr. Bendy is it offers an easy and fun way for parents to connect with and support their neurodivergent kids in exploring social and emotional learning. Also, you know that I love a mission-driven company. Well, Fat Brain Toys is made up of families who want to make life better for other families. It was founded out of the desire of two parents to provide better play experiences for their kids, so their aim is to support you in doing the same. Fat Brain is a new sponsor of Tilt Parenting, and they've put together a collection of toys for our families. Go to www.fatbraintoys.com/tilt to get 10% off all the items in the Tilt collection when you use the code TILT at checkout, and find out for yourself why Fat Brain Toys is a smarter way to play.
When a baby is born, they have the capacity to feel mad, sad, glad, and scared. So we are born with the capacity for anger. And the reason that's important is because I think a lot of young kids get the message very quickly that being angry makes them bad as a child, or it's bad to be angry. So I like to make sure that kids know at the very beginning, anger is a perfectly normal, natural, human way of feeling, and that it's what we do with our anger that counts.
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. Today, we're diving into a topic that will probably resonate with every parent, helping kids navigate the complex emotion of anger. And to explore this critical topic, I'm excited to welcome back the insightful Ginger Whitson, who will share her expertise while we discuss her book, How to Be Angry: Strategies to Help Kids Express Anger Constructively. We know that anger is a normal, natural, and physiological experience that all human beings are born with the capacity to feel. Yet many neurodivergent kids struggle with knowing how to experience and express their anger constructively, and they're in need of strategies and non-shaming guidance rather than what so often happens, they're punished for their behavior. So that's what we get into in this episode: why anger in children can be so uncomfortable for adults to tolerate or respond to, strategies for teaching children alternatives to aggression, violence, or passive behavior, and instead be assertive, the importance of adults stepping in as calm presences to help regulate a child's emotions and foster healthy coping mechanisms, and more. Ginger Whitson, known in her author credits as Signe Whitson, was on the show a few months back talking about bullying. It's a great conversation. Definitely go back and listen to that if you missed it. You can find it at tiltparenting.com/session 353. Ginger is a licensed social worker and international educator on topics related to child and adolescent mental health. She's the author of 7 books, including the one we're talking about today, which again is called How to Be Angry. Ginger is also the Dean of Students at a K-8 school in northeastern Massachusetts and the COO of the Life Space Crisis Intervention Institute. By equipping our kids with these tools, we can truly support their emotional development and help them navigate their big feelings more effectively. I hope you enjoy this wisdom-packed episode with Ginger. Hey, Ginger, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me back. I'm so happy to be here again.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about anger. I've never been so excited to talk about anger before. Last time you were on the show, we talked about bullying, and in the back of my mind, I wanted to get to your work on anger management skills for kids, but we didn't get there. So actually, as I started preparing for this, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much we can talk about here. I'm so glad we're dedicating an entire episode to it.
Yeah, me too. It's a big subject and it's super powerful in the lives of, I was going to say our kids, but everyone, but especially for kids to learn how to manage something that's so powerful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you just take a few minutes to introduce yourself specifically in the context of this work that you've done on emotional regulation and anger management for kids?
I am someone who has spent my career working in mental health with children, adolescents, and families. For the last 12 years, I've been working in schools. So right now I'm in a Dean of Students role at a K-8 school in Massachusetts. But I've always been working with kids that are struggling with either mental health or behavioral health issues. Often the two are linked and intertwined. And just working to help kids know how to deal with all of these overwhelming feelings that come from things as deep as trauma with a capital T, or as everyday and routine as a ball hit me in the face at recess today, and I don't know how to deal with the pain, the hurt, the embarrassment, whatever it is. So from all the different things going on in young people's lives, just helping them gain the skills to deal with all of those emotions. And often the most problematic of those emotions when it comes to how to handle them is anger. So that's become a big focus of my work.
Yeah, that's great. As I said, I don't think we've ever done a conversation on the show about anger. Certainly it's come up in other topics we've explored. And it's an emotion so many of us see in our kids, so many of us experience in ourselves. So I have what might be kind of a ridiculous question, but do you have a definition of anger? Just so we're all on the same page here. What are we talking about?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I have lots of different ways I like to frame anger, but I think the most basic thing is that it is a normal, natural, physiological experience. It is one of the most basic emotions that human beings across the globe experience. When a baby is born, they have the capacity to feel mad, sad, glad, and scared. So we are born with a capacity for anger. And the reason that's important is because I think a lot of young kids get the message very quickly that being angry makes them bad as a child, or it's bad to be angry. So I like to make sure that kids know at the very beginning, anger is a perfectly normal, natural, human way of feeling, and that it's what we do with our anger that counts. And that's where the skill building comes in. But the other way I would define anger is to say that it sort of ebbs and flows in our lives, and also that what might create feelings of anger for one person might be completely benign or neutral to somebody else. So it's not the actual event that causes the feeling, it's how the person perceives the event. But for that person who is angered by the ball hitting them in the face, that anger is very real and can be overpowering.
And so would you say that some people are more wired for anger? And is that related to the way their nervous system responds? Or is it some people's natural tendency or personality to be more angered easily?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a really deep nature versus nurture question. And there's probably scientists that would argue one way or the other. My guess is that, there's a temperament, an inborn temperament, right? And I think we see it in really young babies. Some babies can self-soothe easily from the very beginning. Some babies have immense difficulty calming themselves down from the very beginning. And then I think those sort of natural temperaments are nurtured over time, right? I think when a young person experiences anger when they're very young and they have consistent, reliable, trustworthy adults who help co-regulate them, or, when adults lend their calm to children, kids create these neural pathways that lend them the ability to deal with their anger in helpful, constructive ways. For other kids who don't have a consistent adult that's able to soothe them, maybe it's an adult who punishes them for expressing anger or who's not there to soothe them at all, I think those neural pathways are going in a whole different direction. Those kids might become more and more reactive over time. So I think it's both. I think there's some nature. I think there's some nurture. But I think that we've all seen that in kids and in adults, that some people just are cool as cucumbers and everything rolls off their back, right? To kids, I call those people ducks, right? They can let it all roll off their back like water. They just shake their feathers and they keep swimming. And then there's other people that are just sponges, right? They absorb all the anger. They become weighted down until maybe they explode or they just need to get wrung out. That's one of my favorite metaphors for kids is be a duck, not a sponge, which is easier said than done, but it's a helpful metaphor for kids.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of anger, like I feel like it gets a bad rap. In my personal experience, I have seen that anger was responded to, even in little kids, much differently by teachers and sports coaches and other adults. Even if it's an expression of frustration or dysregulation, it was viewed and responded to very differently than maybe a child who cries or who crumbles to the ground or who is experiencing the same shutdown feeling, but they're expressing it in a different way. So why do you think that it has such a bad rap?
Your experience is my experience also. It's really what drove me to write my book, which is called How to Be Angry, which is based on a quote. And the quote is, do not teach your children never to be angry, teach them how to be angry. But I think the world is changing and we are moving toward honoring anger more, understanding that it's a normal part of life. But I think a lot of us grew up in a world where anger was regarded as bad. I think little girls especially had and still have more pressure to never show that they're angry, right? A grown woman, right? We know the whole thing about if you're a man in a business setting, you're assertive, you're powerful. If you're a woman in a business setting who behaves the same way, maybe you're right. And we're trying to work beyond that. But yes, I think there is still a stigma associated with being angry. And I think it's a really important message that it's not the anger that's a bad thing at all. It's how you choose to express that anger that counts and that makes the difference. And one of the most valuable things we can do is teach kids skills to express that anger assertively instead of aggressively, or even instead of being passive or passive aggressive.
It occurs to me that we also might just want to differentiate, if necessary, when we hear anger, especially maybe with neurodivergent kids who can have really big, more explosive reactions. Should we distinguish between anger and destructive physical rage, or do you see them as all fitting under the same umbrella in terms of how we want to support kids?
No, I think there is an important distinction, and some people might say it's just words, just semantics. But I think it's really important to say anger is the feeling, aggression is the behavior that comes out, or that, it's driven by the feeling. Violence is the behavior that's driven by the feeling of anger. What we want to do is give kids alternatives to aggression or violence or tantrums. We want to help them learn how to put language to the emotion of anger and to express themselves in words and calm non-destructive behaviors.
Okay, great. So everything that we're going to talk about today, including some of the skill building, that all applies regardless of the behavior that is coming out as a result of the feeling.
Usually, kids come to our attention as adults because they're having problematic behavior, right? It's coming out as aggression or violence or tantrums or explosions. Kids who are sort of have that natural duck mentality and always can let things roll off their back or can express their anger, they don't get our attention in that same sort of red flag way. They've just developed those skills in a more natural way, whereas other kids just need help with it. And I guess one of the things I always say is, because I work in a school setting, if a child doesn't understand math, we reteach them, right? And if they don't understand or they're not catching on with how to read, a teacher goes over the lesson again and again and again if necessary. But oftentimes, if you have a child in a school setting who is aggressive, the automatic response from an adult is punishment. What kids who are aggressive need is an adult to teach them the skills that they need to manage their anger, as opposed to just rote punishment. So that's not saying that there's never limits or consequences on destructive behavior. But I am saying that there's tremendous value in teaching kids how to express their anger in constructive ways instead of just punishing them when they make a mistake because of lagging skills.
I want to go into that a little bit deeper, but let's take a quick break. And then I'd love to know more about some of the ineffective ways that people might respond to kids' anger. As a longtime runner, hydration is something I've always had to consider, especially in the hot, humid summers of New York. But staying hydrated is important for everyone, and it's not just about drinking water. Being optimally hydrated means optimizing your body's fluid ratios, including electrolytes. In fact, electrolyte deficiency or imbalance can cause headaches, cramps, fatigue, brain fog, and weakness. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix designed for better hydration. Each pack provides a strong dose of electrolytes without any sugar or artificial colors or any other dodgy ingredients. And while Element is found in enthusiastic community in everyone from Olympic athletes to special forces to functional nutrition experts, it's also perfect for moms, your everyday exercise enthusiasts like me, folks who are fasting or those following keto, low-carb, whole food diets, really anyone on a mission to restore health through hydration. Element's formula was created with a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And again, no sugar. And because I'm a researcher, I wanted to better understand the benefits of having optimal electrolyte levels. And there are so many, including reducing muscle cramps, promoting better sleep, and supporting better digestion, just to name a few. Get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinklmnt.com/tilt. Also, try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. There are a lot of moving pieces and big transitions happening in my world, and I'm finding myself really relying on my routines these days. Because when there are so many changes happening that are beyond my control, consistency in a few aspects of my life has been absolutely critical. That's one of the reasons why I like Ritual's Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement with clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome, as it's become a regular part of my morning routine. One minty capsule first thing while sitting down with my laptop, and I can get on with my day knowing that I'm doing something just for me and my well-being. And the capsule itself is a delayed release, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, which is exactly where we want it to go. But there's a lot more I like about Ritual too. As a company, they're committed to sustainability, using scientific tools to select lower carbon packaging, prioritize sustainably sourced ingredients, and set ambitious climate goals. And they're a female-founded B Corp, meaning they are holding themselves accountable long-term to not only think about their company's financial health, but also the health of people and our planet. I love all of that. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Synbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything, because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside. So you just mentioned punishment is often what happens. And yeah, of course, I've seen that I've experienced that as the parent of a kid who had emotional regulation challenges as a little in school settings. And I'm imagining there are lots of harmful or ineffective responses that well-meaning adults, or maybe just perplexed, or adults who feel like they have no other options, engage in when they have a child who's really angry. I'd love if you could share some of the other maybe ineffective ways, just so we kind of know what we're trying to pivot away from.
So I think one of the most human things, but also one of the most ineffective things that an adult can do is to mirror a child's anger. We are emotional creatures, right? We have these mirror neurons in our brain where it makes it really easy for us to sort of catch someone else's emotional state. But what an angry child who's about to explode needs is a calm adult. They need a calm adult who will lend their calm and help regulate their nervous system. What they don't need is an adult who also raises their voice, who also becomes aggressive. What they also don't need in the heat of the moment is an adult who's lecturing them. Because brain-wise, when a child is dysregulated, they are living in that, they're in their amygdala, right? In that emotional part of the brain, which means they're not connecting very well to their cortex or the language centers of their brain. So when adults is giving them a lecture about blah, 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 this is what you should have done, it might be a great lecture, but in that heat of the moment, kids can't hear you. They hear you, but they're not able to process what you're saying. So in the heat of the moment, matching a child's anger or giving them lectures or giving rote punishment are all super ineffective. What kids need in the moment is a calm adult who will just work on helping them drain off all that intense emotion. And then when they're calm, then you can give a great lecture. Then you can spout off your wisdom. Then you can even explain the limit or the consequence. But kids aren't open to any of that. All that stuff is just ineffective, and it's going to make the issue worse during the heat of the moment.
Right. This is the point where I will share that when I was a parent of maybe a very angry 6-year-old, a friend suggested, because I was trying all kinds of stuff and nothing was working. She said, Debbie, what if you just really let them know how angry you were? I was like, all right, I'll try that. It did not go well. I wrote about this in Differently Wired. It was like pouring gasoline on the fire. And I distinctly remember as a young girl that's how my father would react to me when I was angry. I would clam up and I shut down. So I guess like on the surface, it stopped the angry behavior. But I guess what I internalized, now I'm realizing this is turning into a therapy session for me, but I'm realizing that I internalized this idea that I can't ever be angry or express anger.
Right. Well, I'll just join with you here and we can both have therapy together. But I had a dad who also matched anger with anger. The biggest thing when I was a kid was, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to really cry about. And that meant a spanking. Right. And I have an older brother. We both sort of had that same kind of discipline from my dad. My older brother, because he was a male, because temperamentally he was different than me, he and my father would just match each other's anger and escalate and escalate and escalate. I was the opposite. I didn't want something to cry about, so I did what you did. I just clammed up. I also grew up thinking girls aren't supposed to be angry. Anger is bad. I'm a bad girl if I get this angry. You know, I would deserve this punishment, where like my brother went the opposite, and like he struggles with anger more to this day, or he's still someone that's always going to escalate things. So there, we both had our therapy session.
All right. I feel so much better. But that begs the question, do you think it's important for us, for parents and other adults who are supporting kids, to reconcile their own relationship with anger in order to be better first responders with an angry kid? Because probably a lot of us are walking around with this baggage surrounding anger.
An escalated adult can never, ever de-escalate an escalated child, right? A child who's escalated, and whether it's anger, fear, anxiety, whatever it is, we're talking about anger today, but any heightened state, they only are going to calm down in the presence of someone else who's regulated. And so, yeah, I mean, parents sort of reckoning with their own emotional state and ability to deal with anger, it's prerequisite, right? We're either going to break old patterns or we're going to continue them.
Yeah. And I just thinking about being that calm presence for an angry child, I imagine for some people would feel like we're okay with it. Like it's an endorsement of this dysregulated human's outsized reaction if we are calm. So what would you say to an adult who is feeling that way?
I love that you asked me that. It's a really fair point and a really good question. Holding space for a young person who's dysregulated, lending our calm doesn't have anything to do with accepting their bad behavior. All it is doing is accepting the child for who they are, that they're having this overwhelming emotional experience, that their immature brains haven't figured out how to manage this thing called anger yet. And they need us to be calm in the moment. When they are calm again and their frontal lobes are engaged, then that's a great time for us letting them know that that behavior was not acceptable. That's a great time for letting them practice other skills like talking about their anger instead, or having a glass of water or some kind of sensory engagement. Lending a child our calm doesn't have anything to do with condoning the behavior. It's just the prerequisite. The only way we're going to get them to calm down is to hold space for them. And then when they're ready, we can be very clear that we're not accepting the bad behavior, but we are accepting the overwhelmed, vulnerable little human.
That's great. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I have one other question, and then we'll pivot to getting into the strategies in your book. But I'd love if you have any insights to share about some of the residual effects or impact on kids who have been shamed over time or gotten in trouble perpetually for their anger. Like, what does that look like as they get older? Do you have any research or information on that?
I think what we see is kind of the two patterns we talked about. I'll give you three patterns. I think some kids become much more passive, right? Kind of the model I was describing, where you learn that anger is bad, expressing anger is bad. I better stuff that inside. I'm still going to feel that way, but I better hold it in tight, right? And those are people who tend to become much more passive. They think that their emotions are not valid or not worthy of being expressed. Sometimes that also looks like depression in adults, when you feel like your wants and needs are not as worthy as the wants and needs of other people. So that's one choice. I think another choice is that people don't deal very well with guilt and shame, right? Those are really horrible emotions. And those type of kids never learn the skills they need to deal with the anger. So it just sort of is always bubbling in them. They're always kind of near a point of rage. And maybe they even learn that, I might not have a lot of friends or close relationships. I might be in trouble all the time, but people stay out of my way, right? At least that feels like power to me. And then I think the third choice that people learn, the third bad outcome, would be people who are really passive aggressive. They have sort of figured out, all right, expressing this anger openly isn't getting me anywhere, but I'm not just someone who's going to stuff it inside. I'm going to find these covert ways to sort of get back at you. And you won't even know what hit you because I did it under the radar. Hopefully, the fourth choice in all this is that people learn assertiveness skills. But I think those are the three bad outcomes when people are sort of shamed for their feelings of anger.
As you were describing that passive aggressiveness, like Dwight from The Office popped into my head as someone who operates in that zone. So thank you for that. Let's take a quick break and then we'll dive into your book a little bit.
Hey, are you a parent of a teenager? Are you feeling overwhelmed about how to be what they need while also holding limits and boundaries that keep them safe? Are you tired of conversations that negate how messy this season of parenting is? Well, I've got you. My name is Casey O'Rourke. I am a positive discipline trainer, parent coach, and the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. Every week, I come to you with an interview digging into tough topics with experts I trust and solo shows that go deep into the personal growth and mindset needed to raise teens in a way that grows them into confident, capable young people. I am not afraid of getting real about the intersection of conscious parenting and the teen years, while also bringing in vulnerability, humor, and lightness. I'm walking the path with you and honored to serve. Listen to Joyful Courage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
Okay, so the book that we're going to talk about, which is actually how I first found you, and then we pivoted to talking about bullying in the last episode, but it's called How to Be Angry: Strategies to Help Kids Express Anger Constructively. So can you tell us a little bit about that book, how you organized it, and how you hope it's used by educators, by parents, by anyone who's working with kids?
Yep, absolutely. So the book is really written for parents or professionals, anyone who lives or works with young people that are struggling to manage their anger. And it is filled with structured, guided either conversations or activities, starting with teaching kids a lot of what I've talked about already, sort of the idea that anger is a normal, natural part of life. You're not bad because you feel angry in the first place. We go through some basic neuroscience with kids, but at a level, really young kids can understand. And it's basically just, here's what's happening in your brain when you start to feel this powerful thing called anger. And then very specifically, here's how you can soothe and calm and de-escalate that part of your brain. So we talk a lot about mindfulness and breathing strategies, and we talk a ton about sensory strategies. So the book is chock full of ideas for parents and kids on how to use their sense of touch, how to use their sense of taste, their sense of smell, their vision, their ability to notice things in their surroundings, how to listen sort of mindfully, but how to engage in all these sensory ways of calming the brain. After we sort of take that neurological perspective on helping kids understand anger, then the second and third parts of the book are much, I don't want to say more practical, it's all practical, but it shifts to sort of traditional things like teaching kids I messages, how to use I statements, how to disagree without arguing. That's a big one that I use with kids. How to problem solve, how to find win-win solutions to typical conflict situations so that everybody gets a little piece of something that they want instead of there having to be someone who's treated unfairly, right, or unjustly and then becomes angry. And then I think one of the other big things that I focus on in the last section of the book is teaching kids how to respond to someone else who's angry. So it's not just about teaching kids what to do when they're angry, but it's a really important skill to know what to do when someone else is coming at us with their anger. For a lot of us, that feels really scary. So giving kids some hard and fast skills for what to do when they're receiving someone's anger.
I loved the structure and some of those pieces like that, how to respond to someone else's anger, as well as how to disagree, how to give someone a compliment. Like there are things in there that were unexpected to me. And I was like, oh, but this makes so much sense to include this in there. So I really appreciated that. One of the lessons in your book is called Becoming an Anger Detective. This, to me, as I read that is where I think so much of the critical work happens. And I feel like that's where a lot of parents get stuck. I feel like I'm still learning what anger feels like in my body and learning the skills to catch it right before it flares up. So how do you help kids really connect with that and learn that skill of getting curious about their anger so that they can be proactive?
So it's sort of in two parts. One of the parts of being an anger detective is helping kids understand what the triggers are in their environment. And like I said before, the things that might make you angry wouldn't make me angry at all and vice versa. So you can't have this universal list for kids like, these are the 10 things that would make you angry. So with individual children, like sitting down and helping them sort of identify, you know what, one of the worst things for me is when my sister comes in my room, or my brother takes my stuff, or my teacher tells me to stop working on something before I'm really done with it. So having kids just brainstorm a list. And then the second part of that is having kids go through the list and sort of rank. Oh, actually, the thing that's the worst of all is when I'm hot and I'm hungry, and then someone tells me that I can't do something. And the thing with my sister taking my toys, yeah, that bugs me, but I can deal with that. So that's only a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10. So there's those situational things that I want kids to discover about themselves, because when you can anticipate that you're going to become angry, you're in a much better position to take steps right away to keep your calm. And then the rest of the anger detective, as you started to say, is really about knowing what anger feels like in your body. And what are those early signs that you're starting to be irritated, so you can catch it and use calming strategies before you have already blown your top. And so it's the same thing. We have little, drawings, outlines of the human body and different exercises where we have kids sort of identify, I feel clammy or, sweaty hands. I feel my heart beat really fast. My head's starting to sweat. I can tell that I'm breathing really fast as if I've just run. Some kids are able to identify that when they get angry, they feel their hands ball up to fists immediately, or they feel their muscles start to get tense. So it's really just sort of a creative conversation. It's creative because we sort of have the body map and the different colors that kids can use. And then they create this visual where they can start to just get more familiar with these early signs of anger.
The day we're recording this, I released an episode this morning with Dr. Megan Ananeff and Dr. Deborah Brous about therapy modalities and neurodivergent kids. But one of the things we talked about was how some neurodivergent kids and people can struggle with that interoception and really understanding what's happening in their body. So I'm wondering, how do you work with kids who have a harder time identifying what's actually happening? Like the fist clenching feels very like we can see that and feel that, but do you have any other like strategies for helping kids who are not attuned with what's happening inside?
I think one of the most effective things is sort of when you're in this trusting relationship with the child, they know that you're not someone who's going to punish them for being angry. They are someone who genuinely wants to help you figure this anger thing out. They become open to you sort of noticing for them. I've noticed that when you are starting to get angry, you start to talk really, really fast. Or I've noticed that if you pop up out of your chair and start pacing, that's a sign to me that you're starting to get really angry. Have you ever noticed that about yourself? It seems so obvious to the observer, right? But to the child in the heat of the moment, a lot of times they will say, no, I never noticed that about myself. And that's equally true for adults. So that's basically what I try to do, is sort of be a mirror and a gentle observer for the child and help them increase their own awareness.
That's great. It makes total sense. And I wanted to just spend a minute talking then about the way you broke down anger, and you touched upon these earlier in terms of expression styles. There's aggressive, there's passive aggressive, and then assertiveness. You're kind of steering kids towards trying to build up their assertiveness muscles when it comes to anger expression. So could you talk a little bit about what that means in the context of the other styles, which may not lead to the results that the child wants?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the context of teaching kids that anger is normal and natural, the sort of the next step for me is to say, but the good thing is you have choices, right? You don't have to be aggressive every single time. You don't have to withdraw every single time. There are other choices that you can make. And that's when I'll sort of teach them. In general, we have 4 choices in anger expression: to be passive aggressive, to be aggressive, or to be assertive. And assertive is the one we want to get to. But I like to let kids sort of play around and really experience and explore what aggressiveness looks like, sounds like, feels like, what their impact on other people is when they behave aggressively, if they're able to get their needs met when they're passive. Within the structure of their book, we really focus for a while just on aggression. We focus just on passivity before we get to the real learning in assertiveness. My favorite activity, and what kids always gravitate to or tell me they want to repeat, is there's an activity that off the top of my head, I think it's called Say What, but it's basically, I have a list of 10 sentences, and it might be, I'd like a peanut butter sandwich, or please pass the bread, or I'd like to go shopping with you. But I'll have kids, if I'm working one-on-one or in small groups, you get someone or take turns reading the sentences in 4 different anger styles. So if it's, I'd like a peanut butter sandwich, kids have fun being like, I want a peanut butter sandwich, in a really aggressive, angry tone. But then also to be like, a passive tone, I want a peanut butter sandwich, if it's okay with you, and to sort of exaggerate. And I don't really know what the passive aggressive way would be, maybe a sarcastic, I want a peanut butter sandwich if it's not too much trouble. And then the assertive way, which is good eye contact, a clear voice, polite tone. May I have a peanut butter sandwich, please? So again, basically saying all the things, but having kids really dive into how different these choices really are. And then we also can tune in, like, how did that angry thing feel in your body? Did you feel when you said that your fists clenched also, or your brow furrowed? How did you feel when you were so passive about it? So anyway, it's a meaty activity. Kids get a lot of laughs out of it, but there's a lot of learning in there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I imagine too, a lot of people don't realize how others are receiving their messages. So if you're doing this with a group, you can notice how you feel when someone yells, I want a peanut butter sandwich. And what does that feel like for you? I love that. For listeners who want to engage with your book and who see the value and want to make some movement in terms of their kids having a better relationship with anger, how would they use your book? Is it something you'd want them to kind of sit down and go through chapter by chapter? What does that look like?
I mentioned I'm a dean of students right now, but I was a school counselor for years. So I kind of wrote this book for me as a school counselor, what I would need if I was running small groups with kids who struggle to manage their anger. I'm also a parent. Actually, in writing the first edition of this book, I was doing lots of workshops, and I had parents that would come up to me and say, how do I adapt to this as a parent, as opposed to doing this as a school counselor or as a teacher in schools? So in the second edition of the book, it's adapted that at the end of each chapter, there's a how to adapt this for one-on-one use, how to adapt this for younger kids, how to adapt this for older kids.
That's great. And what would you say the sweet spot is? And knowing that neurodivergent kids are often developmentally a different age than their chronological age, but who do you see the book aimed at?
I'm in a K-8 school, and I can tell you, very honestly, I can use the same book with K-8 students, right? The examples that I use are different for my kindergarten students, my 5-year-olds, than my 14-year-olds. And I go at a much slower pace with my kindergarten students. Maybe it would take me a year to get through the whole book if I wanted to get through all the concepts. Whereas with my older kids, maybe we would spend sort of 8 weeks going through the different activities. I think any user would actually find it pretty easy to just sort of adapt it for the group they're working with, whether it's age or developmental level.
I would agree with that. It's super helpful. The activities seem very interesting in the way that you wrote them. And I could see how it is relevant for all different ages. And even me as an adult dealing with my own anger relationship and dynamics, I got something out of it. So very useful resource. Just as a way to wrap up, for a parent who's listening to this, again, who has a child who might have bigger emotions, might have challenges in staying regulated and have kind of bigger anger outbursts, any kind of words of hard-won wisdom or advice or hope for them that you would want them to take away from this conversation?
I think I already hit it pretty hard, but it's because I'm committed to this idea. I see this as the prerequisite, like an escalated child needs a calm adult. That's the only way to it. And it's a challenge for a lot of adults. It is hard to stay calm when you are already exhausted, tired, hungry, or receiving anger from someone that you've given your all to, right? You've done everything. You have been so kind, so compassionate, but you're their safe place, right? So you are still on the receiving end of anger that you don't deserve. It is human to mirror the child's behaviors and emotion, but it's destructive. What a dysregulated child needs desperately, and before anything else, is a regulated adult who can hang in there with them, not take it personally, do their own breathing activities to keep themselves calm and just be that solid, calm object for a young person. And again, because it can be such a challenge for adults, tap out when you need to, use your support. Don't feel bad when you blow it inevitably, because you will, but there's always time in moments of calm to apologize to a child and say, hey, you were really upset. I was really upset. It was a bad combination. We didn't bring out the best in each other. But I think when parents blow it and they use that as a learning opportunity for how to keep their calm with the child next time, that's a great learning experience too.
Yes, I can attest to that. I have had that learning experience many times in my home. So absolutely, the repair is so powerful. For listeners who want to dive deeper into the staying calm piece, I'm going to just throw out 3 recommended episodes. I'll have them in the show notes page, but definitely check out Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama Mentor. We talk a lot about staying calm in difficult moments. Dr. Mona Della Hook's conversations on brain-body parenting, a lot about co-regulation. And then also, I know that Dr. Lori DeSottles wrote the forward for this book. We've had her on the show twice, and I would say listen to the episode on connections over compliance. There's great stuff in there too. Ginger, I just want to say thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation, and I'm so grateful for the resource that you've created for all of us and all the work that you do, not just in anger management, but in supporting our kids. So thank you so much.
Thank you right back to you for having me back and providing all this information for parents. It's such a hard job. So all the tools we can share and the grace we give each other for this hard job is critical. So thank you.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with a phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at @TiltParenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.